The last hearing before Sean Combs' trial starts. When he walked into federal court today, he appeared to be looking for his family. They've pretty much been at all of the hearings that I've been to, but there was no presence of his sons or his mother or his sister who had previously been at those hearings.
American rap mogul Sean Diddy Combs has been denied bail as he awaits trial on federal charges. Combs pleaded not guilty to racketeering, sex trafficking and transporting for prostitution in a New York court.
It started with a whisper, then came the leaks, and suddenly, one of the biggest pop stars on the planet was walking into a federal courthouse, not to perform, not to present an award, but to testify. Justin Bieber, the same kid who rose from YouTube to global fame, was now stepping into one of the most closely watched criminal trials in entertainment history. But he wasn't the one on trial. That seat belonged to Sean Diddy Combs, a music mogul whose name once defined power, luxury, and hip-hop royalty. Now, that name is echoing through the halls of a courtroom, attached to accusations that stretch far beyond anything the public could have predicted: racketeering, trafficking, coercion, and a secretive empire allegedly built on control and silence. And in the middle of it all, Bieber, a witness. A potential turning point. He wasn't dragged in kicking and screaming. He volunteered, and that changed everything. Because when someone like Justin, with no direct axe to grind and no history of legal beef with Diddy, agrees to testify, it signals something much bigger is at play. This isn't just a case about one man's alleged crimes. It's a trial that could unravel decades of power dynamics in the music industry, shake corporate empires, and drag every guest list, party invite, and NDA-laced gathering into the blinding spotlight of the law. So how did we get here? What made Bieber say yes? And what does this mean for one of the most powerful figures in music history? Let's start from the beginning, because the story that's about to unfold doesn't just belong to court documents. It belongs to the culture. For years, Diddy wasn't just a music producer. He was the music business. From launching Bad Boy Records to building empires across fashion, liquor, and media, he crafted an image of invincibility. Lavish parties, celebrity endorsements, Billboard hits, reality shows, everything he touched turned cultural, and for the public, he seemed untouchable. So when the first wave of federal charges hit, trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, it felt surreal, like someone had made a mistake. Like the system was playing a joke, but the government wasn't joking. What followed were raids, statements, sealed documents, and then silence.
Sean Diddy Combs is about to face off in the biggest trial of his life, from those freak-offs to those RICO charges.
At first, the public reaction was confusion. There were no viral clips of police confrontations, no mugshot circulated, just a headline, Diddy under investigation. Then came a second wave, federal filings, reports of intimidation, controlled environments, and disturbing accounts of coercion behind the scenes. And just like that, the myth of the mogul began to fracture. But even as the legal machinery moved into place, the sheer magnitude of the case remained hard to grasp. This wasn't a street-level scandal or a messy business dispute. This was federal, deeply federal. The kind of case that takes months, sometimes years, to build. With layers of evidence, protected witnesses, encrypted phone logs, and secret grand jury testimonies. What made it worse for Diddy was timing. The world had changed. In an era where secrecy used to be a flex, it was now a red flag. Where controlled access once meant exclusivity, it now triggered suspicion. The same velvet ropes that once signaled status now raised questions. What was being hidden? And perhaps the most unexpected twist of all? This wasn't just about Diddy's inner circle. The prosecution was hinting at something larger, a web, a pattern, a system. And when that kind of language starts appearing in court filings, it means one thing. They're not just trying to punish a man, they're trying to dismantle an infrastructure. That's when people realized this wasn't going to be a typical celebrity trial. This was going to be something else entirely. Something bigger, something dangerous for everyone involved. And then, out of nowhere, one name appeared in the witness filings that nobody saw coming: Justin Bieber. In most federal cases, the moment the charges land, defense teams start looking for a deal, a plea bargain, a way to cut losses. Especially when the government shows up with pages of evidence, sealed witness lists, and a conviction rate that's nothing short of terrifying. In Diddy's case, prosecutors offered exactly that, a plea deal. Terms weren't made public, but insiders say it would have meant a shorter sentence, a closed courtroom, and a chance to walk away with some dignity. But Diddy said no. In a courtroom packed with reporters and legal analysts, he stood in a loose beige jail uniform, looked the judge in the eye, and rejected the offer. "Yes, I do, Your Honor." That was his answer. No hesitation, no apology, no fear. It wasn't just a legal move, it was a statement. From day one, Diddy has insisted that every encounter described in the charges was between consenting adults, that nothing illegal occurred, that he was being targeted, and his refusal to plead guilty wasn't just about saving his reputation, it was about rewriting the narrative. He wasn't just fighting for himself. According to his legal team, he believed he was fighting for every black man who'd ever been targeted by the system, every person who'd been wrongly accused and didn't have the money or platform to fight back. But that stance comes at a price. No plea deal means full exposure. Every witness, every sealed document, every cross-examination, the prosecution now gets to present their case in open court, layer by layer, day by day. And with no admission of guilt to negotiate leniency, the jury holds all the power. That's a risk, even for someone like Diddy. And there's another layer to all this. When a celebrity insists on going to trial, they lose control of the narrative. Suddenly, it's not just about what their lawyers say, it's about what every witness saw, every party they attended, every NDA they handed out, every moment someone remembered differently. You can't hide behind a brand in a courtroom.
Defense has basically been arguing that he's not guilty and saying that these relationships were consensual, that this is essentially a swingers lifestyle, that people went to these parties by their own accord and engaged in this behavior.
So why take the risk? People close to him say it's about legacy, that he's not just thinking about prison time, he's thinking about how history will remember him. That pleading guilty, even to a lesser charge, would mean admitting that the empire he built was rotten at its core. And for Diddy, whose name was once synonymous with aspiration and power, that's a cost he wasn't willing to pay. But the decision sent a ripple through the industry. Prosecutors sharpened their strategy, the media prepped for daily coverage. And behind the scenes, one witness's name started appearing in court prep meetings again and again. Bieber. Because while Diddy was preparing to fight for his name, someone from outside his empire had already agreed to speak under oath, and that changed everything. When Justin Bieber's name first appeared in the court documents, no one expected it. He wasn't tied to Diddy's world, no label deals, no public drama, no motive. So why was he on the witness list? Because he remembered the parties. Private, invite-only gatherings with surrendered phones, North Dakota as at the door, and layers of secrecy. Bieber wasn't a victim, he wasn't even accusing anyone. But he recalled how those nights were run, the security, the protocols, the vibe, and that's what made him valuable to prosecutors. His details matched other accounts, his presence confirmed a pattern, and unlike others, he had no baggage, no lawsuits, no history, nothing to gain, just credibility. That's what scared the defense most. Because Bieber's testimony didn't scream scandal, it quietly proved that what looked like parties were actually something more structured, more intentional. And when he chose to speak, he opened a door the defense hoped would stay closed. And once that door opens, there's no telling what else comes out. To understand Bieber's testimony, you have to understand these weren't ordinary parties. They were secretive, curated events with NDAs, no phones, and tight security. Even celebrities needed pre-approval just to get in. Bieber described blackout curtains, logged phones, and rooms so private they felt sealed off from the world. Nothing illegal happened in front of him, but his memories matched what others said: controlled access, no surveillance, and strict rules. That consistency is what made his testimony powerful. He didn't accuse anyone, he described a system, one built on silence and secrecy, not by accident, but by design. And that's what prosecutors needed to show. This wasn't just one party, it was a pattern. In every big trial, there's a moment when the jury stops seeing files and starts seeing faces. Justin Bieber was that moment. He didn't cry, he didn't accuse, he just showed up, calm and honest, and that made him real. Jurors had grown up with him, watched his fall and rise. That made him relatable. And in court, relatability is powerful. Unlike other witnesses, Bieber had no motive. He wasn't owed money. He wasn't part of Diddy's circle. He didn't need headlines, and yet he still chose to speak. That made the jury listen. He wasn't there to drop bombshells. He was there to confirm what others had already said about NDAs, strict rules, and secretive events. Coming from someone with no stake in the case, it suddenly felt believable. And that's what made him dangerous. He didn't push the case forward with emotion. He anchored it with credibility. And once the jury believed him, believing the rest became a lot easier. If Bieber was the prosecution's ace, cross-examination was the defense's only shot to blunt the impact, and they knew it. They didn't try to discredit him, they tried to minimize him. Diddy's lawyers argued that Bieber only attended a couple of events, hardly enough to confirm a pattern. He hadn't seen anything illegal, just tight security and discretion. That's not a crime, that's Hollywood. They compared his experiences to fashion galas and tech retreats, showing the jury that NDAs, phone bans, and guest lists are just part of celebrity culture, not evidence of conspiracy. But they had to be careful. Coming at Bieber too hard risked turning the jury against them. So, instead, they planted a subtler idea. Maybe Bieber testified to protect his brand, knowing his name was already tied to those parties. It wasn't an accusation, just a suggestion, a seed. But no matter how they framed it, they couldn't change the facts. Bieber's calm, precise testimony matched security logs, driver records, and other witness accounts, and the jury believed him. Because this wasn't about proving him wrong, it was about making him irrelevant, and that's where the defense lost. He didn't need to be the case. He just needed to open the door. And what was waiting behind it would be much harder to contain. Outside the courtroom, a different kind of trial exploded. The moment Justin Bieber and federal witness collided, social media lit up, headlines multiplied, and the internet took sides. Some fans called him brave, others saw betrayal. Every glance, every quote from the stand became viral content. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore, it was a cultural moment. For Bieber, the risks were massive. His hard-earned image of faith and redemption was now tethered to a criminal trial. Behind the scenes, sponsors panicked, ads were quietly pulled, and his team scrambled to contain the fallout. Meanwhile, Diddy's empire was crumbling in real time. Brands distanced themselves, streaming platforms debated removing his catalog. And inside the industry, fear set in. If someone like Bieber could be called, anyone could. The real question wasn't just what did Bieber say, but why did he speak at all? Whether it was duty, strategy, or both, one thing was certain: his testimony cracked open a door the industry never wanted touched. Because when someone that famous chooses to break the silence, even gently, it echoes louder than any headline. And that silence? It's not safe anymore. By the time Justin Bieber stepped into the witness box, the courtroom didn't feel like a courtroom anymore. It felt like a stage. Federal marshals lined the aisles, reporters filled every seat, overflow rooms had been activated. Camera crews stood outside in the rain, just waiting for a glimpse of the man whose testimony was about to shift the axis of a federal trial. And when he entered, everything stopped. No swagger, no entourage, no designer suit, just a quiet walk to the stand, his right hand raised, his voice steady. For a moment, it didn't matter how famous he was. In that chair, under oath, Justin Bieber was no longer a performer. He was evidence. The prosecution opened carefully, inviting, not pressuring. They traced his path to the parties in question. The invitation, the arrival, the logistics. And as he spoke, the room hung on every word. Not because what he said was explosive, but because it was precise. His memory was sharp, his tone was honest. There was no theater in his delivery, just details. He described how he arrived at the event in a car he didn't arrange, how his phone was sealed in a pouch he couldn't unlock, how the room layout made it difficult to wander, how certain areas were only accessible if someone escorted you. He remembered the scent of the candles, the positioning of the security staff, the soundproofing that made the venue feel like a vault. He remembered being confused, not alarmed, not afraid, but aware that this wasn't a typical industry mixer. It felt rehearsed, sanitized, controlled. And that's what stuck, because dozens of other witnesses had said similar things. But when he said it, the jury listened differently, the press reported it differently, the public absorbed it differently. And the defense knew it. They didn't object much, they didn't rattle him. They tried to reframe, asking about other high-profile events, pointing out the lack of anything overtly illegal, but it didn't matter. Because Justin Bieber wasn't the prosecution's hammer, he was the highlighter. He didn't introduce new accusations. He confirmed the old ones. He stitched together memories, routines, behaviors, the small innocuous facts that, when repeated enough, no longer sound innocent. When the court adjourned that day, it wasn't Bieber's face that dominated the news cycle, it was his presence, his decision to testify, his willingness to step forward. Because in a case already bloated with names and timelines, it was his quiet, careful account that gave the entire structure its human spine. He hadn't cried, he hadn't accused, he hadn't even said Diddy did anything to him. And yet, the room felt heavier when he left, because sometimes it's not what a witness says, it's who says it. And in that courtroom, surrounded by lawyers, government officials, and journalists hungry for scandal, Justin Bieber became the story. Not because he wanted to, but because in a world where silence is currency, speaking, even gently, is enough to rewrite the entire narrative. No matter which way the verdict falls, one thing is already clear: this trial has changed something. It peeled back the curtain on an industry that thrives in curated silence, an industry that long believed discretion could shield power. That if you were famous enough, rich enough, connected enough, there were no rooms you couldn't control, no stories that couldn't be buried. But this case, it changed that. Because it wasn't just built on claims, it was built on patterns, on memories, on details from people who had nothing to gain, on names that weren't looking for clout or headlines. Names like Justin Bieber, who didn't cry for attention, but calmly confirmed the cracks in the foundation. That's what makes this trial so dangerous. For everyone watching from the sidelines, it's not just about Diddy, it's about what his downfall could expose. About how many others use the same tactics. About how many careers were protected by the same silence. And maybe that's why Bieber's testimony hit so hard. Because it wasn't a takedown, it was a choice. A choice to break the code of silence. A choice to step into a courtroom when he could have easily stayed out of it. A choice that reminded the world, even the most rehearsed systems can collapse when someone refuses to play along. And as the courtroom empties, as lawyers prep for closing arguments, and as the media counts down to the verdict, one truth remains impossible to ignore: the music industry will never be the same again. Because once the silence breaks, it doesn't echo, it spreads.